exploring quantitative data measures of central tendencies. So there are a number of measures of central tendencies, and here I'm just going to focus on some of the basic ones. So first is the mode. The mode of a data set is the value that occurs most frequently. It may apply to quantitative data and qualitative data or categorical data. So we're talking about before the agencies, counts of agencies. So we see that in this data set here of tweets, there is 61 from NIH, 45 tweets from CDC, 33 from FDA, and so on. So the mode in this case is the category that it happens that appears most often. So if this was the top one, then NIH would be the mode because it's the category that appears most often. In terms of qualitative data, the mode is the value that appears most often. So what is the mode regarding shares? Shares, what is the mode regarding shares? What's the value that appears most often? Remember, kind of examine this is the histogram. Or here we cannot really say because the values are in bins. So we don't know the specific value that happens most often. But we can use Microsoft Excel to quickly calculate it. You just inside here, the formula bar in Excel, you write equals, and then that tells the program that you're going to use a function. You type the function name, mode, the computer starts recognizing that it knows what mode is the function. All functions have parentheses like this, and you put the values or the parameters inside the parentheses. And the parameters for the mode function are the sequence of values you're trying to get the mode out of. And you see that the mode for the shares is 0. 0 is the most common number in this data set for shares. Median is the value at the middle of a normal ordered distribution. Once again, we're talking going back to the percentiles and the ordered distribution. If it's not ordered, then it doesn't make sense to talk about median. So when we're talking about shares, and first of all, so this applies to quantitative data because it has to be ordered. So it has to have some order of it. And the software programs, of course, can automatically calculate the median. You don't actually have to order the data and count. And in this case here for this data set, the median of shares is 1. And what does that mean? Well, it is a measure of central tendency. So you can say that it's not really right to say that most tweets received 1 share because they didn't, but it's the median. So it's if you ordered all the values for all the instances, for all the individual tweets, 1 is in the middle. So what's below it, what's above it? Could be 1 or could not be 1. And actually I did order from this data set, which has 1,174 records. And I kind of put if you see the zeros, I just ordered the values for the shares. And then there are 500 instances of zeros before we find a post with 1 share. So that's kind of almost at the median here. The median probably will be like 550 or something for this data set. So 1 is not the most common value. And it's a kind of average, but it's not the traditional average because that's the mean. So it's the median. And median and mode, let's note, prioritize the order and instances of individuals. Therefore, they're better for skewed distributions. So if we have a distribution with a very skewed set of values, like shares, like we see here before, this is skewed, right? Skewed to the right here. The median might be preferable than the mean, which we'll talk about because it's more kind of realistic as a measure of central tendency. Let's, for example, note 500 values here got only 1 or 0 shares. And then between, above that, the 50th percentile, and then we have to, above that, we have to see it. But let's talk about the mean, and we can compare with that. Mean is the sum of values divided by the total instances once only applies to quantitative data. So mean equals sum of values divided by n. So in the case of shares, we'll sum all the values, 12 plus 1 plus 2 plus 8 and blah, 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 and divide it by the total instances. And of course, the statistical programs can calculate that automatically for you. And in this case of this data set, for this same variable we're talking about, the shares, the mean is 49.36. So on average, each post gets 49 shares. Now, let's think about it. Each post gets 49 shares on average. Well, that's not very realistic because we know that at least 50% of posts from the mean, at least 50% of posts get one or less because it's ordered, one or less. And the median is at 1. So below the median, below the bottom 50th percentile is 1 or less. So this probably a more realistic measure of central tendency for the shares in this data set than the average, because the average counts all the values. The mean prioritizes the values, whatever the values are. So it's better for symmetrical distributions, not good for skewed distributions, because the extra high or low outlier values distort the means. We have just a few records with very high shares, maybe hundreds or thousands, which brings this value up high and then creates a different measure of central tendency. So we've got to be careful when we're talking about averages, means, and a median, and know when and how best to apply them. Another notion that is important to remember is the weighted mean. So this is the sum of values, each multiplied by the weight divided by the total instances, and applies to quantitative data. So I have another example here. Think about if you're selling, you're a farmer and you're selling products, you're selling produce, and you have beans, you have various kinds of beans and rice that you sell, and you know the price of the items you sell, and here you have the amount sold. Well, it wouldn't be great if you were just for you to get an average of what you're selling to only calculate the price per pound, or price per item. Okay, because different items, for example, flaxseed sells a lot and some items sell less. So what you want is calculate the weighted mean, that is the amount you got per the price per unit times the units that got sold. And it's fairly simple. You just multiply the values. So you multiply the price per unit times the units sold. So this is price per units times units sold. And in Excel, we use the function called sum product for this. So you can't just do average, and you cannot just do average for everything like this, because you could select this, average this like this. You can't just do that, and you cannot average just the price per pound. You would get some funky number. What you have to do is use sum product and then divide it by the sum. You kind of have to do a little bit convoluted means to get the weighted mean. So just in case if you may need this in a particular kind of analysis, think about it. The weighted mean is multiplied where x is the data value and weight, w is the weight. You multiply the weight and then you sum them, and then you divide by the summing of all items sold, by summing of all the weight, actually, all the weight. So think about this formula for weighted means. And that's it for this one. I'll see you next time.